Hi, I'm Sarah from The Upcoming. A real pleasure to be able to speak to you about this wonderful film. And maybe for people who don't know anything about it, can you give us a brief introduction? What can they expect if they watch Compartment No.6?
Well, it's a train film about an encounter between Finnish student and a Russian miner in a train in late 90s, and it takes place in Russia. The main character is Finnish student who is in Russia studying the language.
And I mean, I understand, obviously it's based on the book by Rosa Liksom, and you'd come across that book, but it was sort of a bit of a longer process of discovering, you know, whether it was going to work as a film, how you might adapt it into a film, whether it sort of closely match what happens in that book or be more inspired by it. So maybe you can just talk a little bit about that process and kind of the genesis of it.
Yeah, well, it was a long process, but I tried to make it short. Well, I think always when you start working on something, on an idea, whether the inspiration comes from a location or a subject or a character or a novel, I think in the beginning it's always kind of a mystery why this is interesting. For example, in this case, when I read that novel 2011 when it was published, and then I immediately felt that there is lots of potential for a film. And at the same time, I felt like, okay, it's usually book adaptations, they don't work, and it happens in a different country, in a different language, and there was like too many things that I just felt that it might be impossible to make it work. And but then I just didn't stop thinking about it, and I used to travel quite a lot in Russia by train, and especially then I started to think this novel, and later on when we actually started to work on it with the scriptwriters, they asked like, what is the key? What's the story? Why you are so interested about turning this book into a film? And I couldn't answer. I just and then many years when we were doing this adaptation, and from the start we always had the like artistic freedom to do whatever we want with the novel. That was kind of I met this author, Rosa Liksom, before we started working on it, and she said that it's she doesn't really care, and she doesn't really want to be involved with this, that these are two different pieces, and she's just happy that I'm interested to try. And I think after many years of writing this story, after the premiere that we had last July, I was glancing the book once again, and then I saw my first notes that I did on those pages, and I realized that it was just it was mostly a feeling that I was chasing, because we end up changing lots of things from the novel. We changed the decade, we changed the characters, their age, we changed the road, and what stayed in the end was the overall feeling of this kind of a long distance train journey, and then this encounter with our other that first is not so pleasant, but then when you don't, you can't escape, then you have to just go towards the other, and then this connection is starting to happen. That's the story. But I think the main content from the beginning was always a feeling. And yeah, I think that's still there. What stayed, even though at a certain point I told Rosa, the author, that I think there's nothing in common with these two. Like, I think we changed everything. And I think we should start speaking about film that is inspired by a novel rather than based on a novel. She was also very fine with that. And then when she saw the film in Cannes last July, she told me that you didn't change anything. It's exactly how she remembered the novel.
That's interesting.
And then we talked about this. Yeah, because we changed so many things that I was interested in, like, okay, so what's still there? And I realized that it is the feeling, this constant feeling of longing something that you already lost, or leaving things behind and accepting this idea that everything is changing all the time. And obviously this, like, story-wise, the encounter between these two characters, important part of, obviously.
And what do you think the allure is of kind of the train as a setting? And I think, the film plays a lot kind of with contrasts. The cold, bitter winter outside, the coziness of being inside, the fact that you're, enclosed and you have to remain still, but you're actually still moving. So there's lots of interesting things in the location itself that kind of add to the story, and kind of, it provides a space where they're having to look for their own identities, and not at home, but also not in another location. So, what do you think is so interesting about all that?
Well, first of all, train is a very good. It's the best way to travel, first of all, and it's exactly how you said it, that it's not any one place. It doesn't belong to anyone. You are there, like, in this zone. That is, because it's not just a vehicle. It's not because you are not sitting in your own seat all the time. You can also move, and you have places where you can go. So it's not like an airplane or a bus or a car. And this constant movement that there is in the train, I think, is part of the comfort. At least I feel when I step in a train, I feel that I don't need to run anywhere. I can stay still. It's somehow this constant movement makes you relax, and it's a weird state of mind that especially in this, like, very long train trips, that you achieve. And when you are meeting people in that kind of place, it's kind of, there's also this possibility of forgetting your past, or creating your new identity, or so basically you can start lying that you are something, or you can open up. It's also a possibility to let go of things, because when you're dealing with strangers, and you know, it's sometimes it's easier to show things that you wouldn't show to your relatives or your loved ones even. So there's this certain comfort of strangers in train trips that helps these kind of encounters to happen. Even though they are so impermanent, they still might have a long effect.
And can you tell us a bit about the cast? Because of course the chemistry and the interaction between your two main characters was going to be crucial to making this work. So how did you decide on Seidi and Yuriy? And I believe, you know, they weren't even able to communicate that well, you know, off the behind the camera at the beginning. So did that almost kind of play into their characters also having to get to know each other and kind of get behind, you know, the front that each of them maybe put on when they first meet, and then they get closer and closer?
Yeah, the casting is always like extremely important part. I think that's one of the biggest choices that director has to make. And in this case, the chosen ones, the actors who were so to play these characters, I think they are quite different than the characters that we actually wrote. When we were writing the story, I always thought that it's encounter with totally opposite kind of a characters, but they, during this long train journey, they see something similar in the other. They recognize something. But when we were doing the casting, I struggled a lot with Seidi was already casted, but we couldn't find a Russian actor for this role. And then I saw Yuriy in one film, and I wanted to meet him, even though he felt like different kind of a guy than our script had. And then when I saw Seidi and Yuriy together in this auditioning, I realized this is actually the story. It's more about them than the ones the characters in our script. And I realized that it's actually more about encounter between soulmates rather than two totally opposite kind of characters. But in the beginning, they feel like that they are so disconnected and so distant in the beginning, because they are hiding behind these kind of social roles. The other one is playing the part of Russian Finnish student, and the other one is playing a role of a Russian working class guy. But this is not really the true the truth of their soul. So I think it's just like learned behavior there in the beginning, what is keeping them so disconnected. And so casting these two was absolutely one of the main choices. And Yuriy and Seidi, they are, in a way, they feel very similar, and at the same time they are very different. But I think from the first meeting, it was very easy them to connect. And this connection is something which is harder to act. But this first encounter, when the characters are kind of also having a role on top of another role, that's something that is easier to act. So the idea that we talked with them was that when they start, they are more like these kind of stereotypes. They are much more narrow characters in the first meeting and kind of hiding behind a stereotype. But when the journey continues, they are like opening up, they are showing more parts of themselves. And same time, they are becoming a bit more like Yuriy and Seidi, and not like these fictional characters. And I think that worked well. Obviously, they are acting in the last scene as well, but when I'm watching them, I see more like Yuriy and Seidi rather than these written characters.
Mm. And what do you hope people will take away from watching it? I mean, it's got a wonderful kind of offbeat charm about it. I saw Peter Bradshaw called it like the Finnish Before Sunrise. I don't know what you make of that kind of a comparison. But, you know, like, what do you think you want people to take away when they leave the cinema? And, you know, what does it have to say about that very human, like, yearning for connection, you know, ideas that we shouldn't judge a book by its cover, if you like, and, you know, that need to find our identity, and sometimes meeting someone else or talking with a stranger can help you find that.
I don't really. I think there's no like really a message in the film. I think films. I don't usually like films that have a clear message. They usually feel like some mediocre life coach stuff. So there isn't really like a clear statement. But I hope when people are leaving the cinema that they, for me, this film deals quite a lot about acceptance. To accept yourself and your past and your even the parts that you're ashamed of, or even the things that you don't like in yourself, that you could accept them. So I think this kind of a relief or comfort or acceptance of this mess that we call life is would be something that I hope people would get when they see this film. It's for me, it's about acceptance. It's about many things, but I think this is the main thing, to accept yourself and the others as they are, not just as not idealist thing. Is it the word, like not to look at world as some kind of an ideal, but to see the imperfect nature of it and still being able to enjoy it. So I think that might be the positive message.
And can you tell us what you're going to be working on next? And also, you know, how do you feel about the world of cinema right now? We've just come out of the pandemic, and, well, of course, there's a lot going on, you know, politically right now, but perhaps cinema can be a space actually for, you know, welcome escapism, some positivity, some hope. Actually, it can be kind of a place people can, you know, have that escapism, escape from what's happening in reality.
Yeah, that's the beauty of fiction. That's possibilities to see things in a different light. And it's weird that like just when we started to see some light after the pandemic, like, was kind of fainting away, then this Putin's war against freedom started in Ukraine, and this terrible terror. I think that's, now that it's happening so close, I think this is like there hasn't been war that would have been so close in my lifetime. So it's really shocking, and I think that's something that I'm mostly thinking about. At this, I try to think something else as well, but it doesn't really give a space to anything else. It's also obviously it kind of recontextualizes also our film in a way, because it's about it takes place in Russia. It has a Russian character, and I think it gives some shadow, or at least new colors that there wasn't before. But I hope this film actually, I hope this film could play a role in this time, not as a Russian propaganda, obviously, but this idea of seeing the other as a human being, not just as an other. I think this will be our main challenge in near future, especially in this part of Europe. So, because what war does, it's people turn into animals, and we are starting seeing human beings as animals or enemies, or and not as humans. I think that's always the start for something terrible.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope films could show also the other parts, the things that we don't see in news, even in Russia now that it looks so just like a country full of aggression and terror. It still has some beauty in it, which is sometimes hard to remember.
Indeed. It's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you. Thank you so much for sharing all that with me, and can't wait for everyone else to be able to see Compartment No.6 when it's out this week.